Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce, and my esteemed co-presenter, Mr. Greg Terry from the world-famous Greg Terry Experience. Hello Greg, Merry Christmas, welcome. We haven't spoken for some time. How are you, my good man?
I'm doing well. Well, we've spoken, we just haven't spoken on the video camera together. But Merry Christmas to you and Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. Thank you. And all the guys here on my channel, thank you for being here. Going to be a great co-stream. We have a lot of things to talk about over the next hour or so. So let's dig in and get to it, JP. Let's chat about it.
Well, the most important question, I think, that needs to be answered is whether it's still appropriate to have a Christmas-themed background to a video, or has Christmas been gone? Like, I've still got decorations up. You know, these are the important questions.
Well, it's interesting for me that the tippling philosopher, who may be tippling a little bit this evening, just joking, guys.
No, this is true.
Is the one who has the Christmas theme going on. So hey, we're making a big change on you there, JP, and yeah, it's well worth it. It's the holiday season. It runs into the new year.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah. So given that it's the holiday season and you expect people to be letting up and geopolitics to be taking a bit of a break, that's definitely not the case. There is an awful lot to talk about. I've got a geopolitics video that I'm probably going to be unable to record tonight, but my goodness, it's looking at the tabs I've got. In fact, let's just show you the tabs I have here, because that's just the political bit of outside of the US. Then concerning the US, I've got another tab group there for US stuff concerning Ukraine, and then I've got a whole thing on Elon Musk that is just insanity, but we won't be talking about that tonight. But just there is so much going on at the moment, it blows my mind.
Well, it comes down to even the honestly, the Christmas Day missile attack showed us all we needed to know. It was a huge statement. I've talked about this as well. Orban, running off his mouth prior to all of this. The Christmas truce, Ukraine saying we don't have any clue what you're talking about. He's just running his mouth. So you've had Orban with Putin, and now, of course, we'll talk about Fico with Putin. And then Zelensky says, okay, this is not what is in the cards for us, and we don't even know what you're talking about, and we will not communicate with you, dear sir, Mr. Orban. And then, we see the big missile attack that basically wipes Orban off the stage as anyone you can trust with any influence into the Putin world of clowns there. And it set the stage for even people like Kellogg to come out and say, what are you, lunatics, for dropping missiles on Christmas Day, on a holy day? So it just sets the stage. So if anything, we're definitely not going to see a deceleration, but we are actually witnessing an acceleration into the new year. And January 2025, as we have talked about, is going to prove to be potentially game-changing in this war as we go through it. I'll be there in Ukraine, sharing everything I can.
Yeah, well, actually,
I'm not making a Trump statement at all. I'm just saying, in general, the way the world is unfolding, we've got the United States, we've got the transition of power there. We have called elections now in Germany. We have Fico losing his mind. We have Orban showing he is Mr. Irrelevant, and the list goes on and on. Ghost fleets, cables being cut in the Baltic Sea, all the saber. So I can't even let you talk yet. All the saber rattling about invasion of Finland and invasion of Estonia. All of this, it's all coming to a head right now, and every day it's new stuff coming.
Yeah, goodness me, mate. There's so much to talk about there. So, and thrown in, like, you're right. So January is massively important because of Trump's inauguration. Now, I don't want to go down any kind of particularly political route, although I've got an awful lot to say about that. But you've got the dynamics of a government, a kind of lame duck government in place for 20 days that are going to be trying to give Ukraine everything they can, in the knowledge that, or in the prediction that the Trump government probably won't. So they're trying to exhaust all their presidential drawdown authority. They've already done that with the USAI, which is orders to American companies for goods. So the presidential drawdown authority is stuff from stocks. They're going to try and exhaust as much as they can. There's a $1.25 billion aid package that is imminent from the US, including an awful lot of ammunition, the kind of stuff that Ukraine need, especially to continue that fight through 2025 if they don't get anything from Trump. And so you've got the dynamics of give everything. The Biden administration saying, right, we want to help Ukraine as much as they can because they might not get extra help. And That's the unknown. We don't know what Trump's going to do. Is he going to help more? Is he going to help less? Is he going to keep the states, et cetera, et cetera? But then also, really importantly, are the sanctions, because I think you are going to hopefully, fingers crossed, see some serious Biden sanctions or American sanctions on the US, and importantly, I believe on Bajina Ivanishvili in Georgia, the Georgian billionaire behind Georgian Dream, and Kobakidze, the prime minister of Georgia, who look like they're going to be majorly sanctioned or are sanctioned. I don't know if those sanctions just come out by the US, which makes an incredibly important statement, but also makes it very difficult for Russia to keep having that influence in that part of it. It's also connected. There's so much going on. So the sanctions, sorry, the last bit I'll say before I let you go is my biggest worry has been for a long time, not so much that the Trump administration won't continue to give military aid to Ukraine, because I think they've probably got enough aid to get on with at the moment, and Europe coming on, but it's more the boots on the ground they need. But it's the sanctions. If Trump lists the sanctions, that is my big worry, rather than the military aid.
And that is what we will not know until January 20th and beyond. Yeah. So what we do know right now is the front line is difficult in some areas. We do know that more aid is coming. We know that HIMARS and NASAMS and artillery shells. I did not see in that list ATACMS. Ukraine desperately needs ATACMS. They've been talking about that, how maybe Ukraine used some of them in places they shouldn't have, et cetera, et cetera. That's not our discussion. That's not our expertise. Regardless, they did some incredible strikes with the ATACMS they had, and they will continue to do so with the supply they have. So the supply coming up to January 20th will be interesting to see what unfolds. Additionally, with that, and I really don't want to talk about it too much, because I really am the wait and see guy on this one. There's no way I'm going to try to predict what's going to happen post January 20th. We have a lot of days until then that Ukraine is in critical situation, and we need to do everything we can to support. But I will tell you this, here in the United States, there's just a lot of chaos going on in regard to this transition with Elon Musk, with Ramaswamy, with them not understanding how government operates, throwing out all these words. Biden, I'm not saying it's doing it. I'm just saying these are the narratives out there right now. Well, Biden's selling wall parts and all. It's just, dude, it's just nonstop here in the United States of this story, that story, this story. We're seeing fractures. We're seeing people change parties. We're just seeing chaos right now, and there's no way to predict what'll happen. No way.
And I don't think chaos helps Ukraine either. I think chaos is only going to help people like Putin who want chaos around the world.
It's exactly what he wants. Bingo, JP. Bingo.
And ATACMS is an interesting one. The officials that I saw reference said that the US are unlikely to give any more ATACMS to Ukraine because of their own strategic stockpiles, and that they've got apportioned some to the Middle East and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, if those two officials are to be believed, unknown officials, etc., but that would be a shame, because then you're relying on Storm Shadows. Interesting that Storm Shadows 2 nights ago hit an underground facility of Shahed drones in Oriel, which is very important for 2 reasons. One, it was the use of those deep into Russia, as deep as probably they'll go, the Storm Shadows. You could probably eke out a little bit more range. And that's important. And that it's taking out Shaheds. So we know that, the amount of Shaheds that are being thrown into Ukraine is incredible. But actually, last couple of days, we've seen far fewer. And that could be as a direct result of that, or other strikes that we just don't hear about. I'm sure there are strikes we don't hear about.
Well, their production machine is rolling. And yes, Ukraine has struck multiple places, actually. Even over toward Kazan. They were getting over there towards storage facility and manufacturing facility for Shaheds. That's correct. Yalavuga. And your pronunciation is perfect, as always. When we were running around in Ukraine, Johnny translated everything for us. It was just perfection. But by the way, so that is good. And also coming out even this evening in some news out of Ukraine, they're talking about how we see, I can't say we see until next week when I'm there. So they see the tactics even changing. So the Shaheeds have been adjusted, and we've already been talking about this over the last few months, as far as the Shaheeds doing basically three different things. They try to exhaust air defense. Number two, they run cameras and they do mapping and they do reconnaissance. And of course, the ones that are loaded with munitions go for their targets. But now with the development of artificial intelligence confirmed by Ukraine, they can even load a target, and if it veers off course and it disconnects from the network, it will fly just looking for something, a smokestack, something that represents a target, and they hope. So the Shaheeds, they will continue. This is typical what they do. They like to get Ukraine kind of, especially the civilians, relaxing for a few days, because man, there are critical power issues happening specifically in eastern Ukraine. And Johnny, you've been there. You know how difficult it is. You have a small family, you're in a city, air alarms are going off, you have no power, you live on the 8th floor, and you've got to go to the bunker, because it was just a couple of weeks ago, Zelensky says we need to pay even more attention to the air alarms, especially post Oreshnik and post some mass attacks. So please, just warning the civilians, please, let's not grow weary. Let's not grow lazy. Let's get to the bunker. So these things make it difficult as well. Additionally, Ukraine coming out yesterday talking about the supply of missiles they believe that Russia has, and it was quite significant. And
so just on that point, before you go on the missile point, just going back to the Shaheeds before we lose that, absolutely right. So the AI information was interesting about how they can do that, exactly as you say. Really good point. I talked about that in my last video I've just released. But also, there was a claim that of 150 Shaheeds launched, 20 to 30 of them, was it 20 to 30 of them will not be decoys? In other words, a huge volume. Now, I don't know whether that's accurate, but that is to say the majority of these Shaheeds are not loaded with warheads. And of course, if you don't know, you still got to fire and that's producing an asymmetry of spending lots of money or resources taking down these drones. And most of them are actually decoys, which also says a lot about Russia's ability to produce large scale, lines of drones with warheads. So, although
yes, they can speak to that. The other thing is, when Ukrainians are on the ground, most of the time they actually know, at least my friends I talk to, not just military, but civilians, they typically know if they feel that the Shahed actually has a warhead on it, because typically those are flying more of a straight line pattern and on a target heading somewhere with a little deviation to it. But a lot of times, and we've seen them even in my home city, Khmelnytsky, the Shaheds just come around and they fly around in little circles, just, up about the 7th, 8th, 9th floor level. And they're either mapping, decoying. And I mean, my friends have watched them for 30 minutes flying circles, and they finally move on. Most of the time, those are either cameras or decoys. Typically, when they're loaded and you're paying attention, they're kind of moving on toward their target, with the others doing what they do. And in regard to missiles, Ukrainian security saying they have more, they have plenty, but we are
1,000. They claim 1,400 in stocks of long-range missiles, and they claim the ability to produce between 30 and 50 Iskanders per month, 30 and 50 KH-101, and 50. No, it's 50 Iskanders, and between 30 and 50 of one of the other types. I can't remember. Anyway, so but that you've got to consider that Russia also needs to keep things in strategic reserve in case they get engaged in any other war with NATO. So if they exhaust those 1,400, then like Poland could beat them in an arm wrestle relatively easy. So it's difficult for Russia, but they still do have some. Sorry,
I think we'll continue to see more Korean missiles flying, North Korean missiles flying. Because that's there are significant losses on North Korean troops. That relieves the pressure off of the Kremlin a little bit. Okay, these guys are dying for us now. And additionally, we all know Kim Jong-un has no value of human life. It's proven not only with this war, but it's proven over decades of the North Korean regime's 3 generations of what they've done to their own people. So there's no care or concern there. So that will continue. My South Korean friends that I've talked to that I really trust, and even others, have said, this could potentially, if it keeps going, see upwards of 100,000 over time. North Korean troops. Kim Jong-un reiterating that supply will continue to come, artillery, and the KN-23s. They will continue. So we have to watch on that. Ukraine also saying, in regard to these large scale strikes, that they're really trying to get to the point now where instead of just every couple of days, 5 or 6 missiles flying and 50 Shaheeds, now really targeting for larger scale attacks. And that could be significant due to an improving air defense situation that Ukraine is having, possibly, or also that they really are targeting right now infrastructure. And then when you get into all the saber rattling with FISO, and you talk about transit, the pipeline supply through Ukraine that Zelensky says will potentially be turned off January 1st. Then you have the Moldova situation with Gazprom saying we're going to cut you off, and then Russia saying we're just going to go ahead and smash the pipeline, and we want to continue to hit electrical infrastructure. So we'll just continue to cripple you there. There's a lot of oars in the water right now that relate to these large scale missile attacks, especially in electrical infrastructure.
What have you heard about, because I've been waiting with bated breath, because Ukraine have announced a number of times over quite a long period that they have scaled up their production of attack drones to the level of Shaheeds, and then I think the Shahed production took off. But they've been claiming that they've got large-scale, long-range attack drones being manufactured at scale, and the same can be said about kind of missile drones, these kind of mixture between drones, cruise missiles. You've got the Trembita, you've got the Peklo, the Hell drone, a missile drone, and then you've got Neptune 360, R360s. Some of these, I mean, they've again announced that they can hit 2,000 kilometers today. Now, yes, and they've said this a number of times, but I'm waiting for this kind of massive scale attack where they can do what the Russians are doing to the Ukrainians, but do that to much more strategically important military targets or energy infrastructure targets, and we just haven't seen that. They have increased the amount of strikes in the last month or month, 6 weeks, but we still haven't got to this stage where actually they're doing what they're hinting they should be able to do. Have you heard anything?
Well, listen, you have to remember this. Russia is fighting a different war than Ukraine is having to fight. In general, Russia is fighting an offensive war. And in general, Ukraine is fighting a defensive war. So when you look at, yes, it would be a golden world that Ukraine not only was able to strike at Shahed manufacturing facilities, for example, air bases where these airplanes are stored that run these large-scale attacks or sling these glide bombs. But the reality is their supply is limited. It is good. They are developing their own. They can reach out and touch somebody. All of these things can happen, but there's still limited supply. So what is better for Ukraine? Let's think about it logically. Is it better for Ukraine to make Russians uncomfortable as they're sitting in the dark with a loss of power to say, okay, this is what we feel? Or is it better for Ukraine to be striking fuel depots and military targets and military infrastructure and Shahed plants? Of course, it's logical. Right now, they need to take out the offensive possibilities of Russia and fight a real military war. The reality is it would be nice for both things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's always reassuring to me from a moral point of view when I'm reporting on the strikes the night before, and Russia are striking all sorts of things, the whole range, civilian to energy to occasionally military, and Ukraine are always hitting military targets or at most like hydrocarbon infrastructure, oil depots or refineries. They are never hitting, certainly purposefully, civilian infrastructure. And so that is good to see. They are fighting two different wars, both offensive, defensive, but also
this is why Kursk is important.
One side adheres to rules and norms, and the other side clearly doesn't. Talk to me about your thoughts on Kursk, then.
I think Ukraine has done a phenomenal job. They were able to pull off that operation due to the secrecy, and they were able to do it because loose lips were not sinking ships. But as the war of attrition has taken place and they are fighting inside Russia, it's positive. It's been good for future negotiations. It's good to show that what Ukraine can actually do militarily if they're supplied and if they are able to carry out warfare the way that they plan. But we have lost significant territory. There's a lot of talks inside Ukraine right now that they may have to pull back to save lives. I'm not saying that's what they are going to do. There's just the early conversations of it, because it is difficult to hold on to that. But Ukraine has done a superb job, man. A superb job.
Yeah, the calculations there are really good. I mean, the Russians have lost a huge amount, but then they've just been able to bring in North Koreans and use
They're
them
fighting
as,
North Korea in Kursk.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of unfair, if you like. There's nothing fair in war, but it's the idea that Russia is using North Koreans as expendable, kind of almost like artillery shells. We've used up a bunch of shells. Let's buy some more in. We've used up North Koreans. Let's buy some more in from North Korea. And so that has meant it's even more difficult for Ukraine. The question I am wondering is, because I was thinking one of Ukraine's intentions was to hold on to Kursk past January the 20th, so they have some bargaining chip if they're forced to negotiations under the Trump administration. But that's quite a long way away still for Kursk. 20 days plus 30 days, 25 days, and actually it is becoming increasingly difficult for them there.
It's just a fact, man. It's just a fact. Kursk is difficult. Kursk is difficult, and there is a value that you have to think about. And
that's changing every day. It changes.
It changes every day. But unfortunately, and I hope the world is recognizing this, and we'll see as we go forward, Ukraine is fighting two armies. I mean,
yeah. And I think the key there, though, is that, and I said this before, that the bilateral agreement between North Korea and Russia that took place, I don't know when it was, 6 months ago or whatever, when Kim Jong-un and Putin got together and they signed like an Article 5 agreement that said that if we're invaded, you can come to our help, come to our aid. And what we're seeing is North Korea doing exactly that. And I think that's why the West has not got so involved directly, because Russia have been somewhat careful, I speculate, to keep those North Korean soldiers inside Russia. Now, if those North Korean soldiers go into Ukraine directly, I wonder whether you would get a much more escalatory scenario where actually Western partners of Ukraine say, no, that is a step too far, or whether, again, it's just Russia being able to push the envelope. But I think there's definitely a reason that those North Koreans are staying in Kursk at the moment.
And once again, we will see. I mean, we know that North Koreans have been in Lugansk, Donetsk Oblast. They have been on the streets in officers' uniforms in Mariupol proper. That's proven. But the combat operations, we shall see. It's just going to take time and patience right now. It's why I just believe the month of January is going to be critical. This is going to be one of maybe a better word is pivotal.
Yeah,
it's going to be a pivotal month.
What do you think about the rumors? I mean, actually, rumors coming from Russia. Russia have said that Russia have said that Ukraine will launch a counteroffensive in 6 to 7 days. Of course, that's Russia saying that. But then there were claims about Ukraine wanting to wrest back the initiative, maybe mounting a counteroffensive. I don't know whether they've remotely got the forces to be able to do that. What are your thoughts on a Ukrainian counteroffensive at all?
I don't believe it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, let me tell you something, brother. You've been there with me. Pokrovsk is important. Those paved highways are important. Mega, mega important. And that's where critical battles are going on now for logistical supplies. People look at cities like Kharkov and they look at Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, and they're taking these little villages and moving through them. Russia, that is, like Shevchenko, and they cut off the key paved highway that connects Pokrovsk down to Constantinople and Drivka, where you then go south, turn left, go east, and you're into Kharkov. These are critically important logistical roads. They cannot be undervalued. With that said, that supply line, are there other supply lines? Yes, of course. Has the winter so far been favorable? Yes, it has. However, new weather reports, I'm looking at the extended forecast because I'm packing now. I leave for Ukraine on Wednesday. And I'm looking, and they're saying, okay, this winter summer is going to be over. We're going to be looking at basically some -14s all around Ukraine, which is brutally cold. And so everything will change. Weather will change. Supply will change. Transitions of powers in foreign countries will change. The Kursk, what are the North Koreans going to do? It's going to be an extremely pivotal month. But for me, is to answer your question as far as a counteroffensive, I think it's vitally important that Ukraine do the best they can to hold on to territory in the Kursk region as maximum as they can, with
I agree.
with the right type of value from it. But at the same time, man, we need to hold that
everything
paved road.
costs.
We need to hold that paved road in Pokrovsk.
And these are dilemmas, isn't it? Like it's like, what's the least worst outcome for Ukraine here in terms of, we are going to lose people, we're going to lose land. What's the best amount of people and land to lose whilst also attriting and keeping hold of, etc., etc. As a question
right
here,
now, but just to finish that thought, right now, I mean, Russia's about 7 kilometers from the Dnepropetrovsk region. South of Pokrovsk, coming across Shevchenko line, and they're trying to get to that next paved road, and that puts them 3 kilometers from the Dnepropetrovsk Oblast. Then the question falls, do they go into the Dnepropetrovsk Oblast? And I'm not saying they will. Hopefully we're defended, even a counteroffensive down there, and we stop them in their tracks. But does that raise another question? I don't know the answer to that. You're right there. Yeah.
So Kursk, there we go.
And
so
Dnepropetrovsk Oblast is just right over there.
There is, I'm just trying to see where the dotted line is, but it is all
about 7 kilometers.
So it is definitely challenging
because then you're not talking about Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea. Now what? Dnepropetrovsk. So we just need to watch it. No predictions there. No, nothing along that. It's just, so you would ask me, okay, what's more critically important? Okay, man, we cannot allow just these roads to fall into Russian hands or allow Russia to get into the Dnepropetrovsk Oblast, because then every narrative changes. Because Dnepropetrovsk Oblast is not on the fake books, that they changed their constitution, that these are our lands. So it's a lot going on. January, very pivotal.
Bobo Ozala says, Great Terror Experience, will North Korean prisoners be very valuable? I'll answer that first off and say no.
No, they'll be very thankful that they are in a Ukrainian prisoner of war camp having 3 meals a day. And they're alive.
So the flip side of that is it would be great if international, because Ukraine is so desperate for boots on the ground, right? It would be great if, say, the International Legion could quadruple in size, like times 10, and you get as many people as possible coming to help Ukraine from abroad to help with the boots on the ground. But any single foreign prisoner of war, so there's another British one that was taken the other week, and an Australian one, these people are very valuable for the Russians, and they are worth an awful lot, or in terms of what the UK or Australia would have to give back to Russia in order to get those people free. And that is the shame of it, is that you would love international aid to come in terms of boots on the ground, but it does come with unintended consequences there, in the way that North Korean prisoners of war are valueless, essentially, to Russia and to North Korea. Like,
completely valueless.
Yeah. And I don't mean that in terms of people are without value,
I don't mean that in scales of human life. We're
Yeah.
speaking in regard to their value as far as like information or exchange or something of that nature. For Ukraine, they're zero. And as far as the Russian side, and even Kim Jong-un and his mythical world there as Rocket Boy, it's valueless on the human life on their side. Now, for us as sane people, all human lives are important, and we value human life, but that's a different topic. Do they have value for Ukraine? No.
There's a question here. Please ask Greg what he thinks about Russia now signing a mutual security pact. So similar one. I don't know the details of this one, but with Iran, I did report on one the other day.
Yes.
Bearing in mind Trump's view of Iran. I mean, this is interesting because Russia are happily going about sorting things out, irrespective of what the rest of the world thinks. They don't care about anything. The world. he can do anything. He's not adhering to rules and norms, and so he's going around consolidating an axis of evil. BRICS is expanding. They've taken on Thailand by the looks of it, and you've got Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these countries interested or joined to BRICS, and they're happily going about doing their thing. And we're dithering in the West, going, "Oh, well, is this war? Isn't it war? Should we? Shouldn't we?" And then you've got stuff like this that absolutely, and I'm sorry, but this absolutely disgusts me. Greg, this is he's a Republican senator called Mike Lee, who I do not like one iota. And
the one that dropped the flag that said universal symbol for money laundering. What a piece of trash.
Yeah, just like if that's what's going around in, you know, American information spaces from a politician in America, like,
let me tell you what's, well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you what's going around in Americans. I go into Walmart and I walk around with my Ukraine sweatshirt on that I didn't take off for 5 days while we did that fundraiser for those drones with Prof. And then everybody, dude, everybody, Democrat, Republican, independent, Christian, non-Christian, liberal, it doesn't matter. Anybody would walk up to me and go, dude, that is the coolest sweatshirt I've ever seen in my life. Do you help Ukraine? Do you work in Ukraine? Dude, it was everybody.
That's brilliant.
From young to old. And so let it be, man, the people, there's power in community. Yeah. There's power in the people. And as I've been saying, if we keep pushing the right examples, hopefully governments will come along and follow the great examples of humanity. Do I think this security pact with Iran right now, it's just another one of those things that are pivotal for the month? We can't predict what Trump is going to do. We can't predict what any nation is going to do. But I will tell you this. Everything is lining up for that axis of evil, as we've talked about, and we are watching it unfold right in front of our eyes. And these guys are serious. This is the same story I talk about all the time, JP. Donald Trump will go out of office in 4 years, or there will be another election. That's it. Okay. We are seeing right now that Germany, the government has been called for a new election. It's going to happen in February. We see that Robert Fico can go to Moscow as the prime minister of Slovakia. The Slovakian people have helped Ukraine in immense ways. The people, Hungarian people, have helped Ukraine in immense ways. This cat can go there, and this is all about the Iran question, all of them, they're all together. This cat can go there and come back and literally spew Vladimir Putin talking points over the last day or so. I did a video on that earlier today, and people are seeing it. I had his Facebook message in Slovakian translated to English. I showed Zelensky's response. He was literally quoting Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov talking points. Here's the issue, JP. Slovakia, the last time I checked, is a member of the EU and a member of NATO. So we want to talk about a pact between... When we want to talk about a pact between Russia and Iran and Russia and North Korea, hello, we better look at our own pacts. We got the stinking Prime Minister Slovakia having tea with Putin, coming back, spewing his talking points.
It's disgusting. Man, Robert Fico and Viktor Orban. I don't know who I dislike. There's so many people I dislike in the world at the moment. But I keep talking about. And by the way, someone did ask. Look. Zilly said, JP is too obsessed with Elon Musk. The reason I'm obsessed with Elon Musk is because I'm obsessed with democracy around the world and the shrinking, backsliding of democracy around the world. And he is a megaphone for autocracy. And also, this is super important. I spent some time talking about this in my last video on military aid. And Ian Bremmer was talking about this as a political analyst, saying that watch out, because he might have given Starlinks to Ukraine and now wants to kind of backtrack a little bit and change his mind on Ukraine. But Taiwan, if Taiwan asks for Starlinks, if China go and cut cables to Taiwan for internet connectivity, one human being, Elon Musk, the most powerful man on earth, holds the key to Taiwan being able to communicate, to have communications and military communications. And the idea that Ian Bremmer was saying that he will not allow Taiwan to use Starlinks because he has a Tesla set up in China, where he's the only business in China that is operating unhindered, right? What's he getting back for that? that some people, even people on the MAGA right, are accusing Elon Musk of being a Xi Jinping tool. And so, you know, why I'm obsessed with Musk is because he's super important for the future of politics and discourse in the world. He's the most powerful human being on earth. He's the richest human being on earth, one of the most powerful human beings on earth. And actually, he's supremely powerful in terms of the amount of satellites. The number of SpaceX satellites in orbit around the world is staggering. Go and read the New York Times article on how much power that man has in terms of national security. So when we talk about geopolitics and national security here, Elon Musk is part of the conversation. That's why I'm obsessed with him. Plus, he says dingback stuff about Ukraine as well. So I'm obviously not a fan of him. Anyway, back to Iran though. I'd be interested in your opinion here.
Let me just say this, because I don't want to talk about Elon Musk. I can't stand him. Okay, because it's so interesting for me. The world loved him, and now the world hates him.
Yeah.
Okay, we've seen a transition. Let's just be honest.
Couldn't hide.
Do you really think he and Donald Trump can coexist?
No. Lots of people said this before the election. Is that those two people? That they will fall out very soon.
Absolutely.
And actually, some people are thinking more before the inauguration. Who knew? But yeah,
once again,
100%
patience, patience. These things are going to unfold, and it can be even in January. And I'm talking now about internally in the United States, but
White House isn't big enough for both of them. That's for sure. But here's an interesting point on Iran, and like my position on Israel and Gaza is very nuanced, right? Which is, you know, Hamas did terrible things. Israel did terrible things back to civilians in Palestine. And you can argue whether that was warranted, morally justifiable, considering the amount of civilians they killed in order to kill Hamas people. I would say that in other situations, you would say that was morally reprehensible, but they did that. Okay, so that's done. I'm not minimizing that. I found that difficult, but I understand why they want to react strongly. Then they went to Lebanon and smashed Hezbollah and have done all sorts of things kind of north of their border there. And then you've got Syria happening, and then you've got Iran tooling up Hezbollah through Syria, now unable to do that because Hezbollah are being taken out by Israel by doing some crazy stuff and pages and blowing lots of people up and doing stuff, which again, you can talk about the morality of all these things. But the end result is that Iran might be Israel's next target. And if Israel start doing some things very explicitly against Iran might be somewhat distracted by Israel in order that, you know, they can sign whatever thing with Russia they want, but actually they've got other things to worry about down here. So, and if Israel then continue to, as we've seen them strike like manufacturing plants previously, when we're thinking, well, that's good for Ukraine, they weren't thinking about Ukraine, but they did strike some Shahed manufacturing plants and whatnot earlier on in the Ukraine war chronology. They are used to doing things against Iran. I don't know. I reckon Israel could be an interesting variable in this, just to answer that question that was asked, in the calculation as to what Russia does with Iran.
Let's make it very simple. With all of your waxing eloquent, which is beautiful, by the way.
Well,
Bashar al-Assad is in Moscow. What else do you need to know? Okay, he's in Moscow. Number two, we have discussed this from the beginning, and our channel has grown now, and people are beginning to hear this narrative that I've tried to communicate. I've been working in this region for 30 years. My first trip was to Moscow, in the Middle East, in Israel, Lebanon, all these places, and Africa. It's all connected, man. Every bit of it's connected.
100%.
And as things fall, unfold, new attacks, new alliances. Listen, dude, after January 20th, and I will say this in regard to the administration change, there may be some crazy things that unfold in regard to the American-Israeli relationship that can have direct influence on an Iranian-Russian relationship, and then that can have a direct influence on the war in Ukraine. Brother,
it's his law of unintended consequences, where things like have these knock-ons. It's not that the US would want to aid Ukraine in doing that, or at least the Trump administration would want to, but as you say, helping out Israel could help out do something with Iran, which could help out their ability to assist Russia.
And this is why my best thoughts are, just be patient, because right now there is so much instability happening, not only in the US, but also in Europe, in the war in Ukraine, and in the relations between the Middle Eastern nations that you have just talked about. It's unfolding and changing every day. Who would have ever thunk it that Fico, and I'm back to this topic, Fico would go to Putin and come back and start spewing Putin talking points.
Well, as he says, what do you think is the connection between Fico and Putin? Do you think there's compromise?
Well, definitely a bromance.
Money?
Definitely a bromance, brother. The dude is the prime minister of Slovakia, a nation that is a border nation with Ukraine, has been very helpful. Now, it's a small nation, but been very helpful. Slovakian people, Slovakian government through this war have been very helpful. And he's coming now spewing the literal Vladimir Putin talking points. So what is the relationship? Well, there's definitely some type of common respect there. I now go back to a video I shared 2 days ago or 3 days ago, where after the Euro Economic Council in St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin was interviewed, and he did all of his waxing eloquent with his personal reporter there, Zarubin, and others were allowed to ask him questions. And one of the questions was, of course, their stage guys, was, what are your thoughts about the relationship with Slovakia? And Vladimir Putin himself said, I see Slovakia as a nation that could be helpful in this situation because they are truly neutral. And I'm quoting Vladimir Putin, truly neutral. We have a good relationship there. Okay. Last time I checked, they're in the EU and they're in NATO. Okay. Yeah. So it's really, really
some uncomfortable discussions need to be had within NATO and the EU. So, like, my thoughts are, well, okay, maybe I could put my thoughts together in answer to this question. So, Andrea Shahed says, do you think the West will get off their posteriors and help Ukraine if the North Korean troops enter Ukraine? And likewise, Ronnie Vranken, aren't we just procrastinating until January the 20th and wait to see what the nut does, what Trump does? Now, okay, let's kind of put both those things together. I think Europe are the EU are stepping up. The good thing about the EU, that you've had the EU elections and you've got a rotating presidency of Donald Tusk and Poland coming in, which is going to be super important. That's replacing Viktor Orban's presidency. Excellent. So you're likely to see more sanctions from the EU. So if the US step back, I think we could see the EU really try and step up in terms of weapons and aid. You've got Mark Rutte being very strong for NATO. You've got the Nordic and Baltic states continuing to be very strong. You've got the UK seeming to stand strong. France, interesting. Germany could be the key one. And you know, again, if you're talking about why do I talk about Elon Musk all the time, Elon Musk has just written an op-ed in Die Welt to support AfD in Germany. So that's all you need to know about Elon Musk. So I don't know. I think the EU will step up. Whether countries will, what they would do if North Korean troops went into Ukraine, I don't know, because I think this has been a massive game of chicken where Russia pushed the envelope and we don't want to admit it's war, and so we don't.
West and East. I'm not in control of my own cameras here. I'd zoom in. That's all right. West and East and a big line. Okay, there you go. West and East and a big line. And you can put on the West, okay, US, Europe. I even add wonderful nations like Australia that supports, and of course they're not West, they're down under, but powerful supporters of what is right. Australia, Japan doing so much to help Ukraine. So now we can kind of take the West off of it. You just have a division in this world, and everybody has thought that it's going to come down to, okay, you could replace that with US and Russia, and then the nations that fall underneath that, because, you know, big boys. Okay, forget that. These dividing lines are going to change in shocking ways. I personally believe, and I'm not just saying that, but when you see things that comes out of Western leaders, Europeans and American, some of the things that have come out of American leaders, Donald Trump and many others, even like the tweet you just showed.
Yeah, I was
okay,
just going to show that again.
See that this dividing line, everybody thought it would be, okay, NATO and Europe and EU and America and Australia and Japan. Guys, it's going to even change. It's going to change. You're going to see continual alliances adjusting because Russia has been working to destabilize this world since the 50s.
And they are succeeding now. It's so frustrating. They're succeeding now. But what we might see, and lots of people have been talking about whether the EU or EU states and UK and Norway and other, you might see a JEF, some people, Joint Expeditionary Force. You might see some kind of quasi-NATO alliance between countries, because the US might go an isolationist route. So there are lots of options of what could happen, but I do have a feeling that those countries that know what they're talking about in Europe, in the East, in the Nordics, Baltics, UK, and actually France and actually Germany, because I don't think AfD are going to get in, but they will be a problem. These countries know that Russia is truly a threat. And so I don't think anyone's, pulling the wool over their own eyes, but I do think that people are afraid to admit that we're at war, and therefore that gives Russia permission to do things like cut cables, and we go, oh, is that war? Does it trigger Article 5? No, it doesn't, but it should do. In my opinion, it should do. But people say, oh, because we don't want to go to war, we won't say it triggers Article 5, and that gives Russia permission to keep on doing these things.
I go back in time 3 weeks ago, India striking the largest oil deal in the history of the world with Russia. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. And it will come to a head. It is going to come to a head. The world cannot continue this way. And that is why, we wake up some days, and wherever you're at in the world, you wake up. And I know if you're here watching this on a Saturday afternoon, US time, or an evening there in the UK, or maybe morning, middle of the night in Australia, wherever you're at, this is important to you. And you wake up and you check the headlines, you check the YouTube channels you follow, or the twits, or the blue skies, or all these things out there that you follow and you feel is a good source for you. And we thank you for being here, by the way, today with our joint co-stream here. But the reality is you're invested in it. You are invested. And as this continues on, more and more people will become invested, because it then will begin to touch them as these other nations are becoming involved. You've discussed it. The Middle East, you were going through that entire thing. I've spoken over and over today. Robert Fico, Orban, and then the Germany call for elections, the transition of the United States, Vladimir Putin just back there going,
yeah.
I'm not giving him praise at all. I can't stand the man, and I can't wait for the day of victory for Ukraine. But the deal is, Russia has been preparing for this since Nikita Khrushchev in the 50s. And we are seeing it unfold. It was discussed, the 4 points of subversion, political subversion, and how to overthrow from 1984. What was it, Yuri Nemtsov? And we see these things unfolding, or Yuri Bezmov. We see these, Bezmov. I got so many names in my head. Thank you, Bezmov. Thank you. We see these things unfolding right in front of our eyes, and sometimes it's just hard to believe the world is completely destabilized. I mean, can you believe Donald Trump runs around calling Trudeau the governor of the 51st state? Come on, man.
I
know. I don't like it either. Really? And I'm a conservative. I can't stand it. Are you kidding me?
And I'll tell you what, I've got a question for you in a minute, or a statement, but I just want to throw
Thank you, Bezmenov.
That was it. I just want to throw in this one as well. Just, it blows my mind. So you got Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, saying Donald Trump is 100% right again. Greenland is critical to the defense of the USA. We love the Danes, but a couple of additional drones, dog sled teams, and inspection ships are not enough to defend Greenland against the Russians and Chinese communists. Greenland needs anti-aircraft, counter-drone, and anti-ship missiles. It also requires at least one frigate and full-time patrol and a squadron of fighters. If our great ally Denmark can't commit to defending the island, the US will have to step in, as Putin's 47 said. Now, my question is, what's the difference between that and Russia invading Ukraine? I don't like. There's some weird things going on in the world where you've got people at the head of the US government saying, "Yeah, I think we could take Greenland. Yeah, why not? I mean, it'd be for the good, right? I think we can take the Panama Canal." Hang on, we're just go incandescent with rage for the last 2.5 years that Russia's done that to Ukraine for its own strategic goals, and now you're justifying taking other countries that are allies as part of your strategic goals. I am just like, is this really happening? Is this actually happening?
But that's how he rolls, okay?
Yeah.
And I do not support it. I support it zero. And Prof and I've talked about it many times. It just throw out these extremely radical, shocking statements. Just loves it, just shocked, and then comes back in a couple of weeks and shocks again.
But this is a national security advisor.
I understand.
So this is adding. This isn't just a shot statement. This is someone then go, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Let's think about that. Yeah.
But there's no logic in any of that. Zero. Okay, so. The reality is, once again, back to where we started. We've seen this coming for years and years, and historians have seen it coming for decades. And to be quite honest, America itself and European nations basically got caught sitting on their shirt tail while so much Russian disinformation crept into national leaderships, state leaders. And I'm not talking about United States. I'm talking about national, states and media centers, and we allowed this to happen year over year over year over year, and it continues right in front of our eyes. I mean, right now, Moldova coming out and saying, "Don't you dare cut our gas off." Once again, we can bring Moldova back on the table. We can bring Transnistria back on the table. So much happening, man. I can't wait to get to Ukraine. I can't wait.
Yeah, there is lots of things I want to say. So just to let people know what you're talking about there. So Moldova, Gazprom have officially announced that it will leave Transnistria without gas from January the 1st. And then the government of Moldova does not recognize any alleged debt to Gazprom. Prime Minister Dorin Rasian has said. The head of Moldova's government claims that Gazprom's decision confirms the Kremlin's intent to leave the residents of the unrecognized Transnistria without light and heat in the middle of winter, and that Russia is using energy as a political weapon. The Prime Minister added that the government will explore legal options, including appealing to international arbitration to protect international interests and seek compensation for the Kremlin's decisions, which cause economic damage and jeopardize the safety of Moldovan citizens. So, you're right. It's all going off there.
Dude, okay, incredible. So just a few minutes ago, the Prime Minister of Moldova come out and says, okay, how stupid is this? You're going to cut off energy supply and power in the winter to the region you claim is yours, the Transnistria. So how ignorant. Okay, but it's what they do. It's what they do.
Yeah. So two things. I just want to very quickly, this is just for my Canadian viewers. Sylvain Coiffon says, sadly, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, failed to respond in a manner the majority of Canadians appreciated, that is to the Trumpian threats. He seems weak AF. My question is Chrystia Freeland, was it finance minister who stepped down, who's kind of the brains in the Liberal Party there? She stepped down in this fight between the Liberals, between her and Trudeau, really. Will she be in a position to take charge and be a competitor against the other party, Poilievre? I pronounce that incorrectly, but my question to Canadians out there, is Freeland likely to be up for that? But I wanted to go to just a random aside. This is actually from another Canadian Ukrainian. Says, ask Greg why he recognizes India as an enemy of the West, yet you, that's me, have yet to reach this position. My position on India is I don't think about it enough because I've only got one very small brain and it struggles to get through the day as it is at the moment. So my position is that India do have a nationalist government who are BRICS well, they're really not even that interested in BRICS. They're interested in themselves, and they will do anything to grease the machine for their benefit. To my knowledge, Greg is the only one to take this position, i.e. that India are the enemy, if you like.
Well, I've never called them an enemy of the West. They definitely are a combatant of the West if you are funding the Russian war machine to wreak havoc, not only in Ukraine, but around the world. So you are partnering with that, with the largest oil deal in the history of the world. That's my position. And it's not a good one. And thank you for agreeing. I mean, it's just logical. You're talking about the most populated nation on the planet.
And China.
India.
I mean, China and India, like together with Russia, you're like, this is a problem. And we can, my position on BRICS is, right, you can laugh at BRICS and say, oh, they're not really going to challenge the US. They're not really going to replace the dollar as an international currency, although you got Bitcoin and blah, 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 crypto. Like, yeah, but it's not about what BRICS is now. It's about what BRICS might be in 50 years or 100 years time. You can laugh things off now, but actually, if all these countries are going to join in with BRICS because they want to upset the kind of Western hegemony in the apple cart, then we need to be acting now. A question for you, Greg. Do the Russians have in Ukraine a primary logistics node, i.e. like, is there somewhere that could be struck, I guess? Where do the Russians have a particularly important node there?
City of Donetsk.
Ilovaisk. No, have I said that right? Just behind
City
it.
of Donetsk. City of Lugansk. Melitopol. Mariupol. 4 key logistical places for Russians' advance or assault, invasion, war in Ukraine. Are those 4 key places?
Yeah,
it's why they want Kupiansk again.
Yeah,
so they can move that logistical center closer to be able to peep at Kharkiv from a different direction and work. So, but those are your 4 main, Donetsk being the key, and Mariupol and Melitopol.
Yeah, and just to let people know where those are on the map, which has now crashed.
And even Tokmak, key places.
Yeah. So what we're talking about, so here's your map of Ukraine. You've got Melitopol there, which was where they were hoping to get to in that counteroffensive that didn't get further than Robotina.
Yeah, and just above it, Tokmak.
And Tokmak is just above it. That has also, you can see what an important logistical node that is. The same with Melitopol. Talk about Mariupol because that's your entrance in from Rostov. Oblast.
Okay, and then if you want the key port, it's to the left of Mariupol.
Berdyansk here.
Yes.
Yeah, so these are all like important. And then moving up, you mentioned Donetsk, and just behind Donetsk is where have you gone? Where's the railway place?
Where are you tonight? Why do you leave me here all alone? I searched the world over and thought I found true love. You found another, and now you're gone. There's some hee-haw for you, JP.
That was amazing. Ilovaisk is what I was looking for. I was expecting a song on Ilovaisk, but I didn't get that. So Ilovaisk, I don't think he's got any Ilovaisk songs. Here is a railway hub. You can't see it on this map. I don't know if I can overlay it. This is Andrew Perpetua's map. But this has railways there, and that's really important. Actually, that's been hit a number of times, Ilovaisk. That was a sign of a massacre back in the 2014 to 2022 war, where the Ukrainians got hit there. And lost quite a lot, but that is an important place. Donetsk as a whole, obviously, Luhansk, they're pretty significant. And then you are arguing that, I mean, I remember spending time talking about how Ukraine might be heading for Starobilsk, but that never happened.
No, so I can tell you why Kupiansk is important.
Yeah,
it's because it's on the left side of the river.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And this is what's worrying about what's going on uphill north of Kupiansk, up here, where the Russians have got to the west of the Oskil River here, and that is super problematic because they've actually, I was long saying that they're going to find that really difficult because you've got these bluffs, these like steep hills, steep escarpments there, where they're going to struggle to get up there, getting across the river, but they've done it, and they got up there probably between those two there and there, so that's a worry. But yeah,
Well, you know, as Donald Trump said, it's a very flat place, and bullets
whole,
fly for miles, and millions of soldiers are dead. And I took that video and smashed it, dude. I smashed every piece of it. There's not a flat place in Ukraine. You get to the southern plain, but it's going downhill.
And also the fact that everywhere's rubbleized, you know, there's no city standing. It's like,
correct.
There are some places in the east that are pretty horrible, like Bakhmut, and you know, we can talk about that. But man, there's Lviv, Kiev, Khmelnytsky, for example. Even Patriotism and Zaporizhia are still in pretty good nick. And yeah, anyway, right, let's do a couple of thanks, if I may, Greg.
Yes, please do.
One of your guys, Donk on U23. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, he's one of my moderators, my moderation team there with Dunk on U23, and Blonde Bombshell and others do a phenomenal job. Dunk gifting 10 memberships. Thank you as always, guys.
And another one of yours, your former smoker,
Swedish non-smoking initiative, Petra Olsen, who has given up the smoking habit with that daily money, supporting Ukraine on various platforms and channels and fundraisers. Thank you, Petra.
Michael Vujar, one of mine. Thank you very much for that. That's really kind of you, Michael. Thanks for your continued support and being around. I know I don't always say what you agree with, but when I do, happy alignment there. Cheers, Michael. Adam Rounds, Slava Ukraine, absolutely agreed there, and that's one of yours. So thank you on Greg's behalf.
Yeah, Adam was actually making some good context. So we have a setup here in the back room with Johnny where we're seeing all the comments come through. And Adam made some good comments today. Thank you for gifting those memberships, Adam. Thank you.
Julian Rossiter, thanks, Julian. Great support on my channel. If Putin pops his clogs, does the war end, or is it not that straightforward? Great question. I would think it would, actually. I would like to think that those people around him know that Russia are bleeding, like literally and metaphorically, economically, politically. And I don't know that there's anyone that could say it's been a good idea for Russia to invade Ukraine. I don't like, if you could rewind and say, would you prefer Russia in 2012, like as in before even Little Green Men? Would you think Russia were in a better position in 2012 or 2024? And looking at the inflation, looking at the ruble, looking at the amount of dead people, and surely you'd say 2012. Like I'm sure that there would be a move to pull out of Ukraine, but maybe not. Who knows? It depends who would replace him. What are your thoughts, mate?
First of all, I would just like to draw folks' attention as we're winding down that in the same stream we have had the phrase "pop his clogs" from the UK, and I have been singing "hee haw." Where else are you going to get that?
Such a cultural mesh.
I'm not sure that the war would end. It definitely would be beneficial. There are others in the pipeline, but I would tend to lean to agree with JP here on this situation. Regardless, Putin popping his clogs, Johnny will always be the dog's bollocks.
You can think of scenarios where like the wrong person replaces him, but so yeah, we can imagine all conclusions there. But I would hope, and I would probably think on balance, it would lead to a reassessment of where Russia are going in the world.
Ronnie Rankin, hold on, let me just say that Ronnie Rankin put in my chat, does Greg know the translation for this? And he wrote, Diavoli za taboyu, Putin. Yes, I do know the translation for that. The devil's coming for you, Putin.
Yeah. Let's hope so. I mean, I don't believe in the devil, but metaphorically, yeah. And if it's not the devil, I'm going to come for you, Putin. I'm going to waddle my way to Moscow and give you a slap round of chops.
And I will carry you.
Ronnie Rankin says, "Why is Greg so positive? Like, are you positive at the moment? Like generally, I guess not in sense of your life and abstract ideas of.
Well, it's my character number one. But I talk to soldiers every day. I talk to our team every day. You're talking about an overwhelmed, you're talking about David versus Goliath, guys, and David is standing. Sorry for the biblical reference there for you, JP, but I know you get the reference there. You're talking about a nation that was not prepared for this onslaught that has come against them. You have talking about a nation in Ukraine where the world has not fulfilled all of its promises, where agreements have been broken, where security guarantees have not been fulfilled. And you're talking about a nation full of heroes who are still standing and fighting. And we're going into 2025 where nations are saying we need to support Ukraine more. We need to do more. We need to stand with them more. So how can I not be positive about that? We've lost so many stinking soldiers. I've lost so many friends, and the guys that are there are fighting and they're standing strong. And even the ones sometimes go lose a limb and they get it rehabilitated, they want to go right back because they're fighting for the future, not only of Ukraine, but their family, their children, their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles, and other nations, because Ukrainians get it. I remind you of what Vladimir Zelensky said when he left Washington in November and December, and he came back. He says, if you will just supply us, we can win this war, because you don't understand Vladimir Putin, but we do. We grew up in this world. Zelensky, being from Kryvyi Rih, they understand what is happening. Just equip us. And of course, we see crazy tweets from Mike Lee that if you get to Ukraine, you know, you're whatever it was. I don't even want to think about it. The bottom line is, man, 3 years and we're still here. It's incredible.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the pastor at his pulpits. Next, he'll be banging his holy book and chanting, singing Amen. Anyway, so Nate W., one of yours, says, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but UA. That'll be Ukrainian flags. That is translated into letters.
Viper UA soldier here in the chat just said coffee will be hot and ready for me, Viper. I'll see you soon, brother.
And hopefully I'll see you as well, Greg. So we'll talk about this later, but let's go for a bit of Goose Springsteen love here. So thank you for your support, Goose. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on who are legitimate targets in war. E.g., is a propagandist like Dugin a legitimate target for assassination? Are factory workers in the Russian military-industrial complex? Goosey, goosey, goose. This is a right old morally, a philosophical question, should I say. I talked recently about assassination as being legitimate in terms of a thing to do, particularly if it, well, let's talk about military targets. So going and shooting a general back in Russia, is that okay? Is that okay to do? Well, yes, because actually war is literally mass assassination. So what you're doing is when someone is running across a field, you assassinate them with a gun. Like you take a gun and you shoot them. And someone else that's involved in the war, like if you can justify dropping a bomb behind the lines, then surely it's easy to justify shooting or blowing up a general that's involved in the war and prosecuting the war back in Moscow. So I don't have a problem with the principle of assassination in the context of war. And the question then gets interesting when you start moving out of the military domain and maybe into the political domain. So you say, well, here's a politician who has been literally making laws to facilitate the prosecution of the war. Like in other words, a politician could arguably be more culpable for the war taking place than someone you shot on the field of battle, than even a general, right? So that politician like has a moral culpability there. Is it okay to murder someone with a moral this is kind of corporal punishment? So these are real gray areas, and I would just think I would use consequentialist logic, which is that the consequences of an action are what obtains the moral value, which is to say that's how you justify dropping an atom bomb on Hiroshima. Is that, yeah, it's terrible, you've killed 100,000 civilians there. I mean, that's despicable, but you know that stopped the Second World War in the Indo-Pacific, and you know, you use that to justify a greater good, right? You know, evil to justify greater good. So in terms of can you hit military industrial complex workers, I would think you can justify that. It's not nice, but actually those people are making weapons that are going to supply the Russian army to kill Ukrainians, and that is a legitimate military target. Like in the laws of war, there are even energy infrastructure is generally seen. I mean, I think the word is actually generally that you see in the textbooks, which is generally seen as a military target, especially if it's used to help give energy to the nation's military war machine, if you like, and so on and so forth. So I would say that generally, yes. And for someone like Alexander Dugin, who's an ultra-nationalist, horrendous human being whose thought processes underwrite Putin's thinking, that then, he prosecutes a war on the basis of what Dugin thinks and says, then yeah, I think all of those that are mentioned there are legitimate targets. I don't know what you think.
I completely agree with you. And I was doing my best to even understand your philosophical lecture there. But the reality is, man, if you are waging war and you are supporting it and you are assisting in wiping a nation off the planet, you're a target.
Yeah.
That's
it.
Yeah.
I think
because I got news for you. If you're in Ukraine and you're anywhere near the front lines within, we'll just call it 10, 15 kilometers, you're a target. How many? I can't even tell you the number of ambulances that have been targeted and aid workers that have been targeted. I remember Jenya and I dropping aid in Lvovy, right on the river Dnipro. You look right across, you see the Russian positions at about 800 meters. We went in with the military. We were supposed to go drop aid, and they said it was too hot. It was under artillery fire. Let's wait a day. We stayed there on the south with them. Then we went in the next day, and they know what they're doing. They have all the comms going. They said, we feel we have a safe window here. Lock and load, get fully geared up, and let's go drop some aid. This was a village of 300 people, had no food, had nothing. We went in, we dropped the aid, we pulled in behind a building there, had a concrete wall between us and the river. The river was right here in front of us, and the Russian positions were over there. We dropped the aid, and then we hightailed it out of there the best we could. And it was a successful drop of aid. But we did it in partnership with the military. The next day, other volunteers went in, and they did not have the resources we have, working with military, partnering with them, traveling with them, having security with us when we do this. They went in, dropped aid on the same spot, and they were killed right on the spot. So this happens over and over and over again. So if you want to talk about targets, you're talking to the wrong person here.
Yeah, and I just read your personal comments. You've got to shoot now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I need to shoot in about 5 minutes.
Okay, so let me just give and I'll carry on just for a little bit because I have a few questions. I'll do a bit of talking head on my own. This is actually to you. Johnny Negregard is round at yours at the moment. Hello, community. So thank you on Chris'
That is
behalf.
the Norwegian island dweller. Thank you, Johnny Negregard, for your continued support of the work.
He's a legend.
He is a legend.
BTC Bandit, thank you from my behalf. Really appreciate that, BTC. Such a strong supporter of the channel. Johnny Negregard also gifting Greg Terry membership as well. And the last one for you, Greg, and I'll let you go. Minister
for the Recovery of Stolen Toilets, Australians 10.
Happy New Year, Greg and team. Johnny and team, did we lose another F-16 lately? There was the Russians claimed so about 3 days ago. I only saw it in one source, didn't see it anywhere else.
No,
it might have happened.
As far as I know, there's no confirmation of that. Ukrainian side.
Yeah, I was unsure of that because normally you see it in a few more places, and I saw it in relatively few places. So hopefully not. It's going to be interesting to see the Mirages as they come online. They're going to be coming online soon, and they're going to be hitting targets on the ground. So they're going to be used, I think, not like the F-16s at the moment, are predominantly air defense. As I'm sure they're finding their way around doing that. But from what I understand, or the Ukrainians have said, that the Mirages are going to be used to strike with their guided glide bombs, probably more so than the Scouts, because they will have more of them, and then Scouts and Storm Shadows to maybe hit some targets further away. So good, hopefully good news there. Dude, did you want to shoot off? And I'll just finish off here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, John. Hey, this has been a phenomenal conversation. You were talking about seeing you.
So the one thing before you go, the one thing before you go is this. So here's the fundraiser I've been doing, or we've been doing, as a bunch of different. So the Shields, War Translated, Rick the Ukrainian, Suchimimus, Some of these people, Mikado, Operator Starsky actually couldn't do it in the end. Silicon Curtain, Jonathan Fink, Johnny FD, and we got Phil Itner, and I think we've got PS01, one of my sources that I use quite often, coming on to help us as well. This is Car for Ukraine, and we're actually going to convoy some of these vehicles out there, myself and Jonathan Fink and JR in the background here today, and Benny Pie, and a few others. Daniel Smith from Bristol with Love is going to be joining us on a convoy to Ukraine, and hopefully we'll meet up with you there. Greg, you've been doing your own fundraiser. Do you want to tell us quickly about that? And I'll find a link. Is there a link?
It may already be taken down. I'll check, but I can tell you right now, we did Professor Gertis and I did a NAFO campaign for drones, reconnaissance drones for the 54th. We had set a goal of $30,500. Let me see here, Johnny.
They've just asked me to do that, actually, NAFO, and we're hoping the next one is going to help Rick, the Ukrainian, out with one of his, and then it might be the one after that.
Yeah, let me do this, and let me see if it's still there. Yeah, so here it is, Johnny. I'm going to send you this link right here on the chat, on the private chat. You'll pop that up for me, brother.
Yep.
There you go. You have it.
Okay.
We had so one of the organization, one of the units that we partner with, and our organization inside Ukraine, we have to partner with specific units. Like, I just can't go do what I want to do because we have nonprofit status there inside Ukraine with our organization with Zhenya. So we go into paperwork contracts, like with different organizations, different units. This was for the 54th, whom we are partnering with, and we've been working with the 54th since the war began. Then the 67th, the 141, and the list goes on and on. But the 54th needed reconnaissance drones. We partnered with them. Gertis and I on Saturday night set the goal of 30,500 by January the 1st, and that was on December the 22nd. I think we woke up on the 23rd, and it was already fulfilled at the 30,500. We contacted NAFO and said, okay, let's keep going. But we want a cutoff date because we want to get it all processed, because this is a little different because it's not a vehicle. These are drones. So I'm actually going to this 54th unit and, thank you video and partnering. And I'm not in Kyiv. I will go to them where they're at, and I can't give that location, but that's going to happen. So I think that gives people, confidence. They've seen the work that we do, and you and I, we partnered together on many things. We go there. So we extended it until December 25th, Christmas at midnight. And I think they're getting it all turned off now. But the reality is we raised $145,737.44 in about 4 days, basically providing a swarm of drones to the 54th. And we're just so grateful. Now, what do we do next? I get to Ukraine. We have a couple of military units that we are coming up with. We already are in the works on some different partner projects we're going to do with different units. We'll continue, of course, with the units that we help. We'll be running our aid runs, but this was just an incredible testimony of
that's amazing.
Whether it's amazing. It's unbelievable. Whether it's here, whether it's what you guys are doing, partnering together. The bottom line is, when we all work together on all these different projects, it becomes so much more powerful. It's force multiplied, and just so excited to get there and let these guys. I'm going right to the guys, and they'll say thank you. And I just think that gives people a confidence. Like, you're going to Kyiv, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that gives people on ATP Geopolitics a confidence. It's not just some fundraiser out there, but man, I'm going, and you're going, and I just
we're hoping that we'll both deliver the vehicles and then do some reporting. So we'll be going past where we need to deliver the vehicles to get us to Kyiv.
Well, let me tell you this right now publicly.
Back on a way.
Let me tell you this publicly right now. We're partners. And let me tell you, I will see you in Kyiv.
Let's do it.
And there is a seat in the battle bus always for you.
Hey. I want to kiss on the. I want to kiss on the flap. The slap.
I'm going to kiss you right on that forehead, as we always do. JP, I love you, and we'll be talking ATP Geopolitics, all your wonderful community, our community is growing. We're growing because I think we do our best to share the truth. We don't always get things right, of course. Nobody ever does, but we do our very, very, very best. And working together, pretty powerful team, and so grateful. It would not be a team if it was not for the wonderful people of the world from around the globe helping. So thank you guys very, very much.
The last one before you go, Palvi for you. A Finnish grandpa got old, used washing machine by tram to Russian embassy with a note, leave Ukrainian babushka alone, washing machine for you. I don't know what all that means, but I'm sure you do.
Well, I have seen that. I think Paivi's just sharing that information. There's a lot of people that are standing and fighting for what is right, and there's a lot of atrocities happening in this war.
We saw Olena's parents in
Yes, we did.
near Kherson, and Mark Bisque, Mark and Olena. Mark says joining late, but wishing Greg safe travels and so many thanks, Mark and Olena. And I need to get my next video done. I'm just so busy, and I don't have time to do things, but I need to get the video where we were in with her parents and having sharing.
Please do.
In the borscht and brandies and good times. It was absolutely lovely. What a beauty! In fact, just there is a book. That is the book I got. That red one. That's a Russian book of philosophy that that used to be hers. I think Olena's at university, and he gave that to me. So let me pick out a book from the shelf, and I chose that one, of course.
I remember that moment very, very well.
Happy days. Well, look, I'll let you go now, mate. Thank you, Mark, by the way.
Thank you. Be blessed. Thank you, Mark and Elena. And I'll be down that way again. I hear Johnny saying near Kherson, so I won't call the village name, but we know it. So thank you.
Okay, man. Take care, dude.
All right, be blessed. So listen, you're on my channel now.
Yes, I will be about 10 minutes and then I'll wrap it up.
You can do whatever you want. I trust Johnny Pierce with my life.
Naked. But
if you do that, you don't have to worry about having an escort in Kyiv, because I'm bringing the 3rd Assault Brigade after you if you go naked on my channel.
Okay,
all right, love you, buddy.
Take care, dude.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you for all your support. To all my mods, thank you for all that you've done. Been an incredible stream. I have to go to a meeting right now, and JP's the man now, but my chat's still going, so thank you for finishing out with JP. Be blessed, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll go to a question here from Goose Springsteen again, and this is a huge old question. This is another moral. I don't know if I can answer this here or whether I have to do a separate chat on another video. More a question. I'll get rid of Greg there. More a question for JP. But how has the war changed your feelings about things like the value of patriotism, nuclear weapons, and military spending in general? How did you feel about Corbyn in 2017? Okay, some of that's quite British centric. I won't answer the Corbyn bit for now, if you don't mind, just because I don't want to go off on one too much and have to explain who he was to an international audience. But I think those questions are all really, really good. And I have changed my mind, not so much on patriotism. My views on patriotism are somewhat nuanced. I'm at my most patriotic when I'm watching an England rugby game. But other than that, my foray into philosophy over the last kind of 15 years plus has taken me in a direction where I find it hard to be jingoistically patriotic in a way that I might have been younger. I don't think I ever was massively, but I've never been one for huge kind of nationalistic jingoism, especially because I'm quite philosophical, where I look at a border and go, well, it's just an accident of history and geography, and it's an arbitrary line in the sand, and it's only agreement by consensus. And I was just lucky to have been born where I was, in a country that has afforded me security and an education. And I didn't choose to get born in this country, and I didn't choose to get born to my parents. And so therefore, there's an awful lot of luck. And how can I justify going Yahoo about like luck, essentially? And so I in my most philosophical times, I'm not particularly patriotic in that simplistic way. What I'm patriotic about, what I feel really strongly about, is democracy, rationality, and the ability for people in my country to be free and to say what they want to say freely in a way that I can. and I bloody love that. So I can sit on this YouTube channel and I can say the things I want to say, and I don't feel inhibited. And that is something that I'm incredibly lucky to be allowed to do. So this country is great in so many ways. The UK, Britain, and I think we take for granted the freedoms that we have, which is why I'm so worried about the democratic backsliding in the world, because once you lose these things, these are hard-won freedoms that we have. These are hard-won rights that we have, that we, there are no objective rights that exist out there. We construct our rights and we embed them in the laws of our country, but they are as brittle and as fragile as the laws in our country, right, as the institutions of our country. So when you start getting governments in that tear down institutions, they end up tearing down freedoms and the ability to hold governments to account. And before you know it, you've got a dictatorship. And I love my country because it is a democracy, and because there are freedoms. And yes, there's culture and there's history, and there's a rich history in the UK. And some of it's not as beautiful as I like it to be, because although history is written by the victors, I know that we are an imperialistic country and that we went around the world sticking our flags in different countries, etc., etc. I have a nuanced view of my own country, but I'm thankful that I am from this country, and that was a pure act of luck, really. But I look around the world and I think I am deeply worried. It's an inflection point, like I've said a number of times recently, like I was sort of talking about with Greg earlier. We are at a point in history where many areas of the world are democratically backsliding, and we need to fight for what is good and right and proper. We need to fight for our institutions, our rules, our norms, and for democracy and for freedom. And that's what Ukraine is doing exactly, precisely on our behalf. And that's why I feel so strongly about supporting Ukraine. I really bloody do. This is what I get worried about, what's going on in Georgia. I get worried about Slovakia, Robert Fico, and Hungary, Viktor Orban, and Serbia, Alexander Vucic. And I get worried about, for example, here's a great example. If I go back to the news that I was going to share on the on my Geopolitics news piece, is that RT has opened a TV station in the Balkans. So you've got the Balkans, where you've got Moldova and Bosnia Herzegovina, etc. You've now got RT finding a place to do its disinformation there. I am deeply worried about the movement of the world and the power that Russia have. Russia have an outsized power, given that actually when you look at Russia, yes, it's a geographically huge country, but its GDP isn't particularly huge. But it wields a power in the information spaces that I think is truly worrying, and we don't know what to do about it. We don't know how to deal with the information war that is being waged against us, and people like Elon Musk, who have Twitter, have facilitated this information asymmetric war, where you have Russia, which is a country that doesn't allow freedom of speech, utilizing the West's freedom of speech to splurge its disinformation and manipulate the electorate in countries outside of its own, but doesn't allow the same to happen to its own country. And there's an asymmetry there that I think is dangerous, it's unfair, and we are doing a very poor job of fighting against Russian disinformation and the Russian hybrid war that is taking place. So anyway, back to how have my views on patriotism changed. Nuclear weapons have changed. So I didn't really have an opinion. I hadn't formed much of it. I guess I was probably more intuitively aligned with getting rid of nuclear weapons, but I hadn't afforded it too much time and thought. My position now is nuclear weapons is something that more countries are going to want to have because they've been proven to work. Not in using them, but in the threat of using them by having them. If Ukraine had nuclear weapons, you could argue that they wouldn't have been invaded by Russia. But we took them off them with the Budapest Memorandum, and we promised to keep Ukraine safe, and we've not done a very good job of doing that. So yeah, my position on nuclear weapons has changed. Interestingly, you can start getting onto technical things to do with nuclear weapons in terms of the UK's nuclear weapons. The Trident system is a system that is dependent on the US, and the French, for example, have their own kind of much more independent system. Should we be dependent on the Americans? When you look at the political winds blowing in the US at the moment, is that a country we want to be as aligned to given the direction it is going in. And so is France. And, there are questions about the technical aspects of nuclear. I don't think that we can send nuclear missiles without the US say so, really, in the UK. I need to look into that more properly. And military spending is an interesting one, because actually now I properly understand military spending as a really good insurance policy. And if you don't spend on a good insurance policy, when you come to draw on that insurance policy, you will get a poor return for that. So if we underspend on defense, when it comes to the war, that's fine in peacetime. Underspend on defense, that's fine. You can spend more on hospitals and education. And actually, I understand why that happened. It's like, well, we're at peace. Why should we spend on this when we desperately need to improve our schools and improve our hospitals and improve this and improve that? And then when it comes to it, you're like, oh, damn, we do need that. The world is at war. Russia's taking advantage of us having a poorer defense and or a smaller army than we should have, or a smaller navy, or a smaller air force. Is that a good situation to be in? No. But the problem is you have finite resources, and you are here's the issue with the military spending, is that you exist on 4-year election cycles. Putin doesn't, Xi Jinping doesn't. They can spend what they like on the military, and it doesn't affect their chances of getting voted in again, because they're assured victory of getting voted in because they live in a dictatorship, even though Putin might pretend not to. The problem in democratic countries is that if you're going to spend billions on helping Ukraine, billions on your own defense, then you are doing that at the expense of spending that money on education and welfare and things that get you voted in the next time. And then the problem is you come to the next election and you don't get voted in. So there is an incentive not to spend huge amounts on the military, specifically during peacetime, when you live in democratic countries. And I think that is a real issue, and it doesn't have an easy answer. This is a challenge we live in. So I think we should spend more on military spending, but I also understand why we haven't, in kind of a realist context. So it's not to say, it's not justifying why we haven't, but explaining why we haven't. I do understand why we didn't. Was that a good decision? No, in hindsight, not. But at the time, well, yeah, because we're not involved in wars. So actually, we don't need all of those aircraft carriers, or we don't need all of these self-propelled guns, because, hey, we need some more schools. And then it comes back and bites you on the arse. So, everything's always 2020 in hindsight, isn't it? Vision. Corbyn's an interesting one. I think he's much maligned, but I also think he had problematic views on certain things. But actually, interestingly, when you look at the policies he was advocating, they were much more popular. It was only that he wasn't liked. And there's empirical evidence to support that. He was the most maligned politician in British history, as according to empirical evidence on his on the reporting by mainstream media of him. However, I wasn't a massive Corbyn fan, but just to say that interesting one, but I don't want to go down that one. Okay, a few more questions from people. Another Goose Springsteen one. Regarding morality, does that make the homes of the workers, including their families, a legitimate target? Wow. So, okay, this is going back to the question about, and thanks for your support, Goose. This goes back to the question of, is it okay to strike at military industrial complex facilities, workers who are working on building tanks? I would say yes. In this case, I would say no. I don't think families of MIC workers are legitimate targets. But you've got to understand, so this is again, probably another example of something called the Socrates paradox in philosophy, which is where you have a spectrum, and along that line, you have moving from one category to another category. So in this case, acceptable to unacceptable. And at some point, killing certain people along this line, that it goes from being acceptable to being unacceptable. And that line will be different for different people. I would say it's unacceptable to strike at families of people working in a tank factory, but there's no objective truth to this. These are subjective interpretations of these spectra. So it is, it's not an easy answer, and some people will agree, and others will, not agree. With regards to where we draw the line as what is an acceptable and an unacceptable target in times of war. Rami, thank you so much for your Canadian love there. Really, really appreciated. And Michael Vuchar says, how do you take the new Chinese ambassador to Ukraine? I know nothing about that, so I can't answer that question. I've not seen anything about that, but please feel free to let me know. Mitch Mazzarella. Oh, I love this. I should find that tweet again. So I want this to be like a permanent meme. There was a clearly a Ukrainian, a Russian bot that said, what was it? Something like, I am England, I am support Russia, or something like that. And it was just, and it was in all caps as well, or some of it was in caps. I'll have to find the original tweet, and it just tickled me because it's like, this is clearly not an English person. They can't put sentences together correctly, but apparently they support, I am support Russia. So we started like this thing where I am Canada, I am support Ukraine, and we are support Ukraine. So that's what that means. Thank you, Mitch, for being such an amazing support. I've got an email. You've sent me an email. I need to reply to you. I know that. I'm so behind in emails. I can't tell you. I get contacted on so many different platforms. And the reason why it takes me so long to get back to people is because apparently there are only 24 hours in a day. And I just struggle. And it's not because I don't want to. So I will get back to you. And also I will get back to you, Michael, as well. So that's two people in a row that I owe responses to. But anyway. Right, a final question that JR in the background has put up here. So thank you, JR, by the way, who is awesome. Going to be hanging out with JR when we go to Ukraine at some point in time, at some point in the future. So we have, I haven't read this one. SL says, the problem is that politicians are too concerned with their own self-interest instead of truth, justice, and the American way, character and honor. No one will do the right way. I think the problem here is, and so in the context of like, should we be helping Ukraine? It goes back to that, the question about should we be spending more on defense? And the issue is you will have competing demands. When you're an American politician, especially if you, and I've said this before many times, senators have a tenure for 6 years. Representatives in the lower house, House of Representatives, rule for 2 years in America. That means as soon as you're voted in, you're immediately campaigning to get voted in again. You just exist on a 2-year cycle. So the whole time you're just fundraising, literally fundraising to pay for your campaign for the next time you're properly campaigning, which is just around the corner. And that means that you are beholden to your people paying you money for campaigning. And then you are much more beholden also to your electorate. You're much more localized than senators, wanting you to sort out things locally and this and that. And it becomes very difficult to say, well, we should be spending money on Ukraine. So I do understand why there are these competing demands on time and rhetoric and money. But it's understanding the bigger picture, that we have these smaller pictures of what needs to happen locally, but also the bigger picture, and like where if America wants to remain the top of the hegemonic ladder, and if we want, you know, free and fair elections to take place around the world, and we want freedom for all of humanity, and actually things in America's interest like hydrocarbons and trade deals and influence here and influence there, then helping Ukraine is super, super important. There are lots of reasons why we should help Ukraine. And it becomes very difficult as an American politician to be juggling all of these needs and demands of your electorate whilst keeping an eye on the big picture, on the macro picture, which is a geopolitical strategic picture. And as a result, there are people that are just concerned with you know, not helping Ukraine at all, and that money is money not well spent, where there just needs to be better education for people on why we were supporting Ukraine. I was speaking to my mate at the pub this afternoon, saying that the problem is that we, you know, when we have wars around the world, so the Iraq war is an example of going to war for strategic reasons and then trying to sell it on weapons of mass destruction, but probably it's more realistically to do with oil contracts after the war was over. So there was one where the kind of morality and geopolitical strategy didn't really align. And that then gave a sense that America and the UK behind it as its kind of lapdog were getting involved in conflicts around the world with other intentions in place. When it comes to, and the problem is that people then look at that and say, this is US imperialism, and then they apply it to Ukraine. But Ukraine was a very different situation where there was a clear moral dimension, where the Ukrainians were definitely the oppressed, that the invaders waltzed into Ukraine, invaded it, the Russians, and it was horrific. But it was also incredibly strategically important for the US, the EU, and UK to support Ukraine because of Russia and BRICS and hydrocarbons and natural resources and hegemony and 4D chess, but also morality too. So the weaker person being attacked by a thuggish neighbor. And so coming to their help too. Now, why I'm telling you all this is because what happened at the beginning of the war is the Biden administration, and I think other nations around the world, went hard in on the moral aspect of that. But actually that soon ran out of traction with the general public in the US, where it was like, well, we're helping just because it's the right thing to do. Well, actually, sooner Biden should have talked about why they were spending that money on Ukraine for geopolitical, strategic, economic, financial reasons, as well as, and it aligns. Luckily, it's one of the few, I think, conflicts in the world where it is that black and white, morally speaking, and the morality aligns perfectly with the geopolitical strategy. So this is a really lucky situation whereby our sense of right and wrong aligns with our sense of what would be in the best interest of the United States and the UK and the EU from a geopolitical point of view. And that is a lucky marriage, and it is perfectly aligned. But what happens is, if you concentrate on just the moral aspect, people then start saying, well, okay, but why should we be sending our money still to Ukraine? Like, yeah, okay, there's a limit to our charity. So they should have pivoted much earlier to, well, actually, that money is being mainly spent in the US on the military industrial complex. I know that's somewhat controversial to some people, but that's an economic stimulus. So you make the economic financial arguments, and then you also start making these other arguments about, well, this is why we're involved in making sure there's economic and political stability in Europe, and this is how we benefit. And trade deals and global economic stability helps out the US, and actually, you know, hydrocarbons from Russia going to Europe, actually we can replace them with liquefied natural gas in the US. And all these other arguments that you can make, that it's important. And, you know, would we rather Ukraine's important natural resources like lithium and manganese and all of these things, do we want China and Russia to get hold of these, or would we like that to be part of the democratic West where we can trade for them freely and blah blah blah? And that wasn't sold to the American public in a very clear way, and as a result, Biden was leaning too heavily on the moral argument, and that is an issue in my opinion. Yeah, I forgot what the original question was, but anyway, there you go. Goose Springsteen again. Goodness me, thank you, mate. Is net zero in tension with short-term political stability in the West? I can't see how we can continue pursuing it without supercharging populist politics in the next decade. That is such a big question that I don't think I can answer, Goose. Ask me that on another time, because I've got to go soon, as in now. I don't think it needs to be in tension, although war is not good for net zero. I will be honest. The rest is politics have done a really good kind of year-end synopsis of the politics around the world, where they're talking about like COP26 and climate change being off the agenda, and it's not at all on the agenda anymore. And that is a problem, because this is a really big issue for the world. I've got a thing on some Ukrainian in the mountains, Carpathians, I think, their Christmas traditions have been quite affected, because normally it'd be snowy and cold, and the last couple of years it's been rainy and muddy, and actually climate change is really affecting even cultural traditions in Ukraine, which I thought was interesting. But you know, we have, again, it's like when you're talking about spending on defense as an insurance policy, and you can't spend on hospitals or schools. Actually, climate change has suffered. We are not spending on climate change, and we're not doing enough to consider that, because we have been distracted with all the crap that's going on around the world, and that will be to the unfortunately to the cost of humanity as a whole. I think we need to be, I'm sure there's a way of doing both, and so I don't think there's necessarily a tension, although I'm sure there are tensions that exist in certain areas. What you want to do, this is where it's going to go off on one and I'll lose viewers, but what you want to do is try and make environmental things economically attractive. That's the only way you get society to go green. We are a price driven set of entities as humans, and we're much more likely to do things if they're cheaper. And so therefore you need to be piling in the subsidies into green technology that are being piled into fossil fuels. And if you start doing that and actually level the playing field, you'll make green more attractive and cheaper. As soon as it becomes cheaper, you end up aligning morality with geopolitical strategies, right? Once you align those things become easier. But the problem is people don't understand. You need to look into negative externalities and the fact that we have been subsidizing fossil fuels to Forbes wrote some brilliant articles on this, of all people, showing how much the US government piles into fossil fuel industry, and that they piled that into the green tech industry. You know, people think that green gets like money, and they don't. They get nothing compared to what the fossil fuel industry gets in terms of negative externalities, and those external costs being borne by the taxpayer of the countries in which, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, if that was aligned, then you would make green tech cheaper and more efficient and better, and therefore people will be wanting to make the right option rather than feeling they have to because the government's forcing them to, because it's a right moral environmental thing to do, but it costs more. You want to make it cost less, and you want to make the better moral option be the cheaper option. And unfortunately it isn't always that way, but it depends how you slice and dice all these things. Anyway, that's enough of me on that topic. Hopefully that kind of answers your question, but maybe it doesn't. I'm going to leave you with this, guys, and thank you so much for your support and for being here, and thank you for Greg's group for being here as well. I'm just checking, making sure I haven't missed any discussion points and whatnot. Really appreciate all of the support from people. I went to Lidl, which is a supermarket I don't often go to in the UK, because it had Ukrainian wine. I bought some. They didn't have the Ukrainian red, but they had the Ukrainian white wine, and I'm trying to support Ukraine where I can. And while I was there, I was like, oh, there's a German Pinot Noir there, and I'm a bit partial to Pinot Noir, a bit swanky, I know. And I've never had German Pinot Noir before, and this bottle I keep going back because it is that nice. I love German Pinot Noir. There you go. Loving it. That's a really nice bottle of wine. Anyway, I am a tippling philosopher. Thank you so much for being there with us. Really appreciate all of your support, as I keep saying. And good to speak to Greg. Hopefully we'll see him relatively soon, along with some of the team members here at ATP Geopolitics. Let's keep an eye out for everything that's going on around the world. Keep abreast of what's going on by tuning into Greg Terry and the Greg Terry Experience, and myself at ATP Geopolitics. I think Greg is absolutely right by saying January is the month to watch out for. There is so much going on. I do worry about the incoming Trump administration. There are some ways that it might work out beneficial for Ukraine, but there are some people involved that are saying all the wrong things. And as much as Keith Kellogg says some good things, there are people like Mike Waltz actually not saying great things. Trump's been relatively quiet on Ukraine. And then you get stuff like, unfortunately, Mike Lee, who is just an absolute dingbat, saying stuff like this that makes me want to spit out my wine into his face. But there you go. I don't mean to be that harsh, but yes, I do. So, you know, I am so up and down with regard to what might happen after January the 20th. But before then, my goodness, things are going to be happening. It's going to be a frantic month. Let's keep abreast of everything that is going on. Anyway, guys, take care. All the very best. Slava Ukraini, Heroim Slava, and I'll speak to you soon.